Australian international cricketer Phil Hughes has passed away after he suffered a sickening blow during a Sheffield Shield match. The Australian team doctor Peter Bruckner confirmed about the sad news. Bruckner mentioned Hughes never regained consciousness following his injury on Tuesday. Phil Hughes was struck by a rising ball, after which he was left stunned before falling to the ground. The southpaw was hit in the head from a shot ball by Sean Abbott. Hughes was given ground and was rushed away to St. Vincent's Hospital. Hughes was under intense care and induced coma. The news has passed shockwaves across the cricketing world.
A helicopter did arrive on the ground at the SCG, but he did leave via run.
So your first reaction to Phil Hughes passing in a tragic incident?
I think it's a very tragic and sad incident, and it's very disturbing that a cricketer has to, is no more with us. We all think that with the protective gears that are available, it becomes that much easier. But look at this freak accident, and it has cost a life. And I think cricketers world over, cricket administrators, I think it's a sad day for the game actually. Such a young cricketer losing a life and wearing a helmet and still being a victim of a blow on his head. I think it's very sad.
So the Indian team is in Australia right now. Does it change plans in any ways or looking on it?
I don't know basically, because Cricket Australia would probably, if there is anything, they would discuss with the Honorary Secretary BCCI. But for the moment, at least I think cricketers world over will be in a great shock with this incident. And Indian cricketers are in Australia, and I'm sure that they must also be really shocked and depressed at what has happened to one of the cricket colleagues.
Actually, Cricket Australia has issued a statement where they said that, in respect of Phil Hughes and the incident that took place, we are abandoning all first-class games for the next few days. So if it comes to the warm-up games, then obviously these would be open to cooperate with Cricket Australia.
I'm sure, I think. There's no doubt on that actually, because this is something which is unforeseen that has happened, and it's actually a great loss to the game also, that one of your own players loses a life and in this way. I think.
Also, sir, it opens up this whole debate about, even though they are wearing gears like headgear that they were wearing, the makers saying that, it was an outdated gear. So how do you see the whole debate that opens up with this kind of an accident?
Well, I think it really is bound to open up some discussion on the type of headgear that is available. And looking back, I think now we feel an era where there was no headgear, and yet people, there was fastest of bowlers in those days, and yet people did negotiate that. Then came the era of the headgears. Now, even with headgears, we have this fatal accident that has taken place. I'm sure people will give a look as to what best can be done with respect to the headgears, because the game will go on, and the only thing is how best people can be protected. Thank you.
Joining me live at this point in time is Shishir Hatangi, the former cricketer from Ahmedabad. Thanks, Shishir, for joining us. Also joining me live is our sports consulting editor, Borya Majumdar. Shishir, I'd like to come to you first and get in a first reaction from you on this unprecedented tragedy.
Just a sad day for the game of cricket, really. We've seen the game evolve over the years. Good old days, the equipment wasn't just good enough. There were no helmets, and when it evolved into, protective headgear, this is what we get. I mean, cricket can be very cruel. It's given us a lot of joy over the years, this sport. But as we've seen today, there is a gloom of sadness over not only the cricketing fraternity but the sporting fraternity, and
right.
that to me, somebody laying his life on a cricket field, it can't get sadder than that, really, and it's depressing, really.
Well, absolutely. It's interesting that you bring up the safety aspect, because the ICC has agreed to new helmet safety guidelines just a year ago, and this is the first, in fact, change that has happened in 15 years. But at the same time, while Cricket Australia and other countries do support these new guidelines, it hasn't been compulsory. And in the case of Phil Hughes, we've seen that, you know, he was in fact not wearing that new helmet.
Yes, you know, and sometimes it's all about your own comfort level. I mean, if there is a country that is stringent about, you know, safety rules, and even at the junior level, it is Australia in terms of making it compulsory to wear helmets.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's like using your own cricket bat, and, you know, what's comfortable for you makes you feel good. And, you know, so be it in the case of helmets or any other protective gear. And this is where, I mean, it's a freak accident, but really,
right.
you know, when you look back, you say there are so many things that can be done in future to ensure that these freak accidents don't happen.
Well, it is a freakish accident. That's what Borya Majumdar has also been saying to us all morning. Borya, you know, Shishir also echoing the same thing, that it is a freakish accident. And looking back in hindsight, you know, one would perhaps think that there are several things that could be done. Okay, we're going to try and re-establish that line with Borya. Shishir, I'd like to come back to you. You know, we've been talking about the fact that despite wearing a helmet, he in fact, you know, did suffer from a skull fracture and then succumbed to those injuries. But what's also being talked about at this point in time is that the Sydney cricket ground officials, you know, made a call to the ambulance 6 minutes later. There was a 20-minute delay before he was taken to the hospital. Are these at all factors at this point in time that will be taken into consideration, perhaps further investigated? Or do you think, you know, that this is a freakish accident and should be just left at that?
I think there's a learning in this accident, and you know, this fatal accident that happened with Phil Hughes. You know, medical facilities on a cricket ground, whichever the game. I mean, let's look at it from an Indian perspective. You know, I don't think there is an ambulance any time during a domestic first-class game.
Right.
The very fact that they had medical facilities at the MCG or SCG, I'm not sure where this match was being played, but I look at Indian cricket and you look at cricket all over the world. I don't know whether there are ambulances even for first-class games. There could be a doctor hanging around somewhere. So there is a learning. I mean, this is something that, you know, can happen anywhere in the world. It's not only Australia, and Australia probably is one of the places where medical facilities are available on sporting venues. India, I'm not so sure, you know, in a first-class game if these things are available. And just imagine what can happen in India. There's so much of first-class cricket being played at the same time that there is a learning. Obviously there is a learning for everybody, and
right.
more so for the batsmen who wear headgear now.
Absolutely, Shishir. You know, that is an important point that you make here, and I'd like to bring in Borya Majumdar, who is back with us. Borya, Shishir was just talking about how, you know, this entire incident, from this entire incident, there is a huge learning for the entire cricketing fraternity, that, you know, perhaps safety guidelines need to be adhered to. You know, we were talking about how in most games in India, there isn't even an ambulance in the vicinity.
Absolutely correct. But, you know, all said and done, this is a freakish accident and we've got to treat it as such. I mean, you know, people don't wear helmets with grills around the world. Now, does that mean that you will now make grills compulsory? Because if you get hit on the face, you can die. You know, to what extent can you take it? I mean, this is a freakish accident and our heart goes out to Phil Hughes. Will always be, it has completely taken the cricket world by shock. All said and done, it's a sport where things like this, you will, however much protective gear you introduce, there is that -1% chance always, 0.1% chance always of a tragedy like this. If you go back in time and watch footage, the first person to wear the helmet, Dennis Amiss, and if you see, it was a contraption, a white, big, huge contraption in the 1970s. The second stage was with David Hooks,
right.
in the, you know, a little later. David Hooks died in a pub brawl in a nightclub. So, you know, it's very difficult to predict what will happen to anyone. Yes, Phil Hughes was wearing an older variety of a helmet, but that was good enough for any other person to survive. This
right.
is one freakish accident of nature, and we've got to take it as such.
Well, it is a freakish accident and should be taken just at that. Shishir, you know, a short while ago, Borya and I were just talking about Sean Abbott. Because while, you know, everybody is talking about the incident, what exactly transpired on the field, the medical treatment, etc. At this point in time, Shishir, you know, what happens to Shane Abbott? I mean, he's just going to have to perhaps live with this for the rest of his life.
Yeah, you know, it'll take some time. I mean, I know the whole cricketing fraternity in Australia is rallying around him. He's a young kid, 22 years old, you know, just wanting to bowl fast and looking to getting batsmen out.
Right.
And this is what now he has to face. It's cruel. I mean, cruel on the bowler too, and cruel on the person who bowled that bouncer. But I think time will heal best, and he will realize that, you know, this is something that happens in sport. Yes, at this moment it will be very hard to digest. Like you know, every cricketer would probably look at it and say, "My God, this is so fatal. This game can be so difficult." But I think Mr. Abbott will have to just take his time, allow this to sink in, and let it pass. You know, and this, as they say, time heals best for even common men like us. So it shouldn't be any different for a young cricketer.
Right, that's something that Sean Abbott is just going to have to deal with for the time being, and hopefully time will heal those wounds. Bori, I'd like to come back to you on the point that Shishir made earlier about, you know, how there is a larger learning from this entire incident. Do you think now, you know, following this unprecedented tragedy that world cricket is seeing, that perhaps all cricketing venues need to have an emergency management plan in place? Do you think that's perhaps going to be, you know, the next step going forward?
That, I think, is the most important lesson coming out of this. That first-class cricket or grade cricket or whatever you call it, you know, where you are actually using that season ball, 5.5-ounce season ball, which can cause fatal injury, you have to have an ambulance, you have to have basic medical facilities in place. And both Shishir and I know that in India it is not the case. If you come and watch grade cricket in Calcutta, you will see...
I hate to interrupt you at this point in time, but we're...